I have to tell you, in my short time as Secretary of State, I've spoken to, I think, nearly 100 counterparts from around the world. And I just made my first trip, as I noted, to Japan and South Korea. I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is very different from what you described. I'm hearing deep satisfaction that the United States is back, that we're re-engaged with our allies and partners. I'm also hearing deep concern about some of the actions your government is taking.
我们把你们想得太好了，我们认为你们会遵守基本的外交礼节。
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
20年前、30年前，你们就没有这个地位讲这话，因为中国人是不吃这一套的。
Now, the U.S. side was not even qualified to say such things even 20 years or 30 years back, because this is not the way to deal with the Chinese people.
You hear about the first America-China meeting, how it went down the shitter?
I've heard about it, but I haven't actually heard anything. I didn't read anything about it.
Want the real scoop? Want the real unfiltered truth?
Sure.
You won't get anywhere else.
What's the unfiltered truth?
So a lot of people are looking at the meeting in isolation, but if you go a few hours before the meeting, Anthony Blinken and the Biden administration placed dozens upon dozens of sanctions on Chinese officials hours before the meeting was set to start, both in Hong Kong and the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously that made the Chinese pretty angry. And they would even say in the meeting, "Thanks for welcoming us with sanctions. That's not how you welcome a friend." And then Anthony Blinken came right out, right when he opened his mouth, he was like, "Okay, so let's talk about Xinjiang, let's talk about Hong Kong, let's talk about the South China Sea, let's talk about copyright infringement." And that's not usually how these are supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
Usually these are things kind of like for the camera where you just come out and be like, "We all believe in common values of peace and prosperity, and that dialogue can bring about good outcomes for all human beings." That's what it's supposed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he just came out swinging. And so the Chinese ambassador was caught really off guard by all the stuff being thrown at them,
mm-hmm.
and all in front of the camera. So I think a lot of this was performative. And after that, the Chinese ambassador first said, "You don't welcome me with sanctions," and then just basically said, "You guys slaughter black people."
Our administration is committed to leading with diplomacy, to advance the interests of the United States, and to strengthen the rules-based international order. That system is not an abstraction. It helps countries resolve differences peacefully, coordinate multilateral efforts effectively, and participate in global commerce with the assurance that everyone is following the same rules. The alternative to a rules-based order is a world in which might makes right and winners take all. And that would be a far more violent and unstable world for all of us. Today, we'll have an opportunity to discuss key priorities, both domestic and global, so that China can better understand our administration's intentions and approach. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability. That's why they're not merely internal matters, and why we feel an obligation to raise these issues here today.
We hope that the United States will do better on human rights. China has made steady progress in human rights, and the fact is that there are many problems within the United States regarding human rights, which is admitted by the U.S. itself as well. The United States has also said that countries can't rely on force in today's world to resolve the challenges we face. And it is a failure to use various means to topple the so-called authoritarian states. And the challenges facing the United States in human rights are deep-seated. They did not just emerge over the past 4 years, such as Black Lives Matter. It did not come up only recently. So we do hope that for our two countries, it's important that we manage our respective affairs well, instead of deflecting the blame on somebody else in this world.
The
In
Chinese
response.
said that?
Yeah, they just said you slaughter black people.
It's funny because China and Russia hammer us over our treatment of black people so much because they don't really have any compared to their population size. It's kind of annoying, but it seems like tensions
You mean,
between.
wait, are you saying it's annoying that they don't abuse black people because they don't have any?
Yeah, good one.
You want to get that dunk?
Yeah, it seems tensions between the U.S. and then like Russia and China are getting hotter.
Yeah, we were friends before. We've been unfriended. But after that, basically the Chinese ambassadors tried to like shoo the media out of the room so they could start the like actual 3-hour closed door meeting. And Anthony Blinken actually waved them back in so he could get a response. And basically like went on about Korea and Japan and allied interests and etc. And so it was it was kind of a shit show. And
A hallmark of our leadership, of our engagement in the world, is our alliances and our partnerships that have been built on a totally voluntary basis. And it is something that President Biden is committed to reinvigorating and strengthening. And there's one more hallmark of our leadership here at home, and that's a constant quest to, as we say, form a more perfect union. And that quest, by definition, acknowledges our imperfections, acknowledges that we're not perfect, we make mistakes, we have reversals, we take steps back. But what we've done throughout our history is to confront those challenges openly, publicly, transparently, not trying to ignore them, not trying to pretend they don't exist, not trying to sweep them under a rug. And sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's ugly, but each and every time we've come out stronger, better, more united as a country. I recall well when President Biden was vice president and we were visiting China, and this was in the wake of the financial crisis. There was much discussion then, including with then Vice President Xi Jinping. And Vice President Biden at the time said, it's never a good bet to bet against America. And that remains true today.
it was a lot harder than I expected the Biden administration to go, almost to like a fault. Because I actually, usually I think these first meetings should not just be like, basically, fuck you, which that's what it basically translated to be completely honest, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it was fuck you on a good reason. I usually like these to like start off on like kind of a cordial playing field and then slowly build up towards the issues we care about. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best way to cooperate, because once you do this, it's not like, oh, thank you for bringing up our concentration camps. Now we're going to stop them all. Thank you. Like that's not going to happen. Using that, it's most likely not going to happen the other way either. But at least we maybe have some sort of a chance. So I look at the situation and I look how this is treated, and the fact that Biden invited what is essentially the Taiwanese ambassador to his inauguration. He rejected China's like infringement on Taiwanese airspace. He started the most successful counterance to China in the South China Sea freedom of navigation operations. Mm-hmm. He did all this stuff, and I still hear all the time the idea that Biden is like China's bitch because of the Hunter Biden stuff. Even though we have people who were in Biden's administration as former national security advisors saying that Trump said in closed-door meetings like, "Oh man, these camps in Xinjiang seem perfectly fine, Xi Jinping. This is cool," and they give him a thumbs up because he wanted to. Because Trump, a big thing for him is also personal relationships. So he saw him approving of this thing that he didn't care about. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not like Trump's like a Muslim rights activist. I mean, he famously called the ban on Muslims. And then he actually, there's a lot of reports coming out now on how he like spited the Taiwanese on multiple occasions, how he would not send them high-ranking officials because apparently it pissed off the Chinese, and he thought that like if he didn't piss off the Chinese by not sending Taiwan like high-level officials and just literally giving them table scraps, then he could help develop that further relationship. And I look at the situation and I just don't understand how anybody could see this and walk away with this thinking, man, Biden is really just caving to China. Like he's owned by them. I just don't understand.
Are our previous tariffs still in place, or did we get rid of those?
Nope. We still have them all still in place. He had an opportunity to get rid of them, and he kept them. So he's literally kept every single like aggressive Trump policy, except for maybe like saying let's go to nuclear war with like Korea, and like is not going to make the fumblings that Trump did, and he actually was known for starting the most effective counterance to China, which again was the freedom of navigation operations. So I'm just always extremely confused at how anybody could look at the situation and say like he's like Putin's puppet. I mean, not Putin's puppet, but he's like China's puppet. He's a Chi-Com opposition. Just doesn't make any sense to me.
Jesus, gotcha.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your
Dan, show us what your beard looks like without it being dyed.
Dan is using hair dye on his head too.
No, I'm not.
Once you've tasted that power, once you saw the improvement, the youthful virility returning to the facial hair, you don't think you'd be a little bit tempted? You know what, Dan? I'm gonna take it one step further. I bet you dye your pubes.